I lived with my aunt, who lived in a rural city, and I biked to get to work. The route I took to get to/from work was through a very natural woody area that was not very populated, didn't have a lot of streetlights, and was a sort of isolated route in that cars barely drove down that way. And part of the route cuts through a large forested area. One night I was biking home and I got to the wooded part of the route. Before going down the sloped area, I paused to take my phone out and put my earbuds in to listen to music. As I went to take out my phone, the sound of a branch snapping got my attention. I looked up, and only a few feet from me was this tall, pale, bone-thin creature standing off to the side of the trail but still on the sidewalk. It had large black eyes, no nose, and a thin slit for a mouth. Its hands were extremely long and had large clawed fingers, and it was standing in a kind of squatted, semi-crawling posture. Before I could even react to what I was seeing, it let out a loud screech, and at an insane speed, it leapt or moved quickly into the brush, into the denser areas beyond the trail. Hearing the screech sent me into a panic, and my flight response kicked in. I just pedaled as fast as I could through the forested area. The whole time, I could hear large branches and dried leaves being snapped, broken, and the sounds of something large moving through the forest alongside me, as if it were giving chase but not wanting to be seen, if that makes sense. I got through the forest area, which then opened up into a residential kind of area, where there were a few streetlights and homes off in the distance. I wound up stopping underneath a streetlight and looked back at the forest line, and I saw the figure squatted down at the edge of the forest just watching me intently. After catching my breath, I sped back home to my aunt's house, threw my bike in the garage, closed it, and rushed inside, locking every door and window I could. I then ran up to my bedroom, locked the door, and refused to sleep that night. Yes, I know I said I wouldn't tell the full story, but sharing this experience always ends up making me do it anyway. Lol. I did see the creature one other time, a few weeks later in my aunt's backyard, staring up at the window of my bedroom, but I haven't seen it since. I do 100% believe that it was a subterranean cryptid or creature due to its appearance, but also the fact that the area it happened in has a few trails that wind up going underground through some underground tunnels. It just so happened that the city was doing some construction on some of those tunnels and the area of the trail, and I think that the construction had probably caused it to come out to the surface or agitated it enough for it to come out of hiding, and I just happened to be at the right place at the wrong time. Many years ago, a friend and I decided to visit our mutual friend at her university and spend the weekend with her. We had extremely detailed directions to follow, and we were told the trip should take about 3 hours. While nothing went wrong on our drive, it seemed to take forever. I don't remember exactly at what point the woods started, but I do remember traveling through these woods for a long time, perhaps an hour. We were already well past the 3-hour time frame my friend had given us by the time we left the woods. When we finally reached my friend's college town, it was nearly 4.5 hours since we'd left. We didn't get lost, we never hit traffic or stopped for more than a few minutes, but we quickly forgot about it since we were happy to spend the weekend with our friend. When the trip back was a little over 3 hours, we thought it was weird but didn't think much of it at the time. It wasn't until my next trip to visit that I realized something had been strange. I spent that whole next trip waiting for the long path through the woods that we had been on the first time, but it never appeared. Following the same directions as the first time, the entire trip took me about 3 hours, as did every other trip I made out there in the following years. I don't know what happened, and I've never been able to replicate it. I still wonder what happened and where we really were when passing through those woods. When I was younger, my family and I went on a road trip to Wyoming to see Yellowstone National Park. It's a beautiful place, and if you haven't seen it yet, I recommend it. Anyways, so from our home in California, it was about a 17-hour drive in our Yukon XL. It took us several days' worth of on and off driving to get there, and during the nights we would try to find a little motel to rest at. One of the nights, due to us being behind schedule, my dad attempted to drive through the night to get us there sooner. He made it probably into the wee hours of the night before he deemed it unsafe and parked us in this little unlit rest stop in the middle of the woods in some flyover state. My brothers and I had fallen asleep in the car several hours before he'd stopped, so for at least a couple of hours, we were all sleeping in the car in this dark little parking lot surrounded by forest. Having got a couple hours of sleep and being in a pretty uncomfortable position, I woke up in the middle of the night, pretty disoriented, but not really scared. I looked around and saw everyone fast asleep in this pitch-black car, and naturally, I felt pretty alone. I tried to fall back asleep, but it just wasn't working out, so I just sat there for a while, boredom setting in. Looking out the window to see where we were, it was pitch black, so I couldn't see jack shot. Luckily, I wasn't the type to pack light and had brought a couple of flashlights in my bag. Being careful not to disturb my sleeping family, I reached into the back seat, unzipped my bag, and pulled out a little plastic yellow flashlight. It wasn't the brightest, but it was enough to see the foreground of the general surroundings. I put it up to the glass, making sure not to make any noise, and pushed the little switch into the on position. I pressed my face against the glass and looked out. At first it looked like a normal tree line with some bushes, trees, whatever. But as I scanned the darkness, looking for animals, buildings, etc., I noticed this dark shape standing between these two trees in the distance. It looked like the shape of a man, but it wasn't moving, just sitting there. After watching it for a good while and seeing no real signs of movement, I just assumed it was a bush or some kind of natural occurrence. Just as I was about to turn the light off and reattempt sleep, I saw this shadow shape turn 90 degrees and move behind a tree, disappearing from sight. This scared the shot out of me, and I immediately turned off the flashlight and threw my sweater-turned blanket over my head, shut my eyes tightly, and covered my ears. I was paralyzed with fear and too full of adrenaline to get any sleep, sat in this semi-fetal position, clutching my flashlight for the rest of the night. I waited until the sun came up and we were back on the road before I got any sleep. I didn't tell anybody about the man I saw in the woods.